Welcome back to the Zemar podcast. I have a guest with me that I think we're going to bring some light to some marketing for a small and mid-sized company. I have Chris with me. Chris, welcome to the show.
Hey, Butch, thanks for having me. It's a pleasure to be here.
Why don't you give our audience a little bit of introduction about who you are and where you come from and what you do?
Absolutely. Well, my pleasure. So really quickly. So my name is Chris Spanier. I am a marketing consultant. I've been around, doing consulting for about 15 years, but primarily I came from a marketing and a marketing technology background. So I'm old enough that I got started with the internet before the internet bubble really got going. So I've had the pleasure and the challenge, but mostly the fun of seeing kind of marketing evolve from more traditional marketing into more digital marketing and how both of those can really work together. And now, I'm out serving companies throughout our region which if I were to describe them they're all different industries, but if I were to describe their commonality between them, they've all reached a point where they're looking at their operations. They probably don't have somebody in-house doing marketing for them, but they recognize the value and they realize they probably need to formalize this and do a little bit more. So it's a traditional CMO kind of role, but I kind of prefer to use a baseball term, and I call us the marketing utility players, because we'll come in and we'll help them with everything from, hey, I need to do some basic marketing materials to market research to websites to anything in between. So it really feeds my soul, because one, it's helping them get smarter, get better, help them to refine their story, but it's also fascinating because everybody's a little bit different. So it makes every day different, and it makes every day challenging, and it just makes for a lot of fun and hopefully good results for our clients.
Sure, absolutely. And yeah, and you hit a few points that we're going to talk about today, besides all the fun that you've had over the years, right? And so like a lot of things you had mentioned seem more traditional, and you even outlined in some of the stuff that you had written where there's traditional and then digital. So like, is there still a good spot for traditional marketing today? And then have you noticed, is there been a big change with businesses adapting to digital versus the old traditional route?
That was great questions.
Yeah.
I absolutely believe there's a role for both. In some ways, I feel it's almost we've done ourselves a disservice by calling traditional and digital, because it makes it sound like it's an either or, and I really do think they're complementary. I'll give you an example. One of my clients right now is a pretty good sized complex metal fabrication firm, and they haven't done a lot of marketing, but they've reached a stage in their development or their growth that they're servicing clients all over the world. But for them being based here in the Midwest, the question is, how do we get our name out there? How do we want to do this? So I really have to hand it to their leadership team, because when I engaged with them about a year ago, we sat down and they said, okay, here's everything we want to do. And it was this huge laundry list, but they had already gone through and been very thoughtful of, here's the priority that we think. Now, it was a conversation, so we were able to shape that a little bit better, but what we started on was what I would consider more traditional marketing. So defining the market, going through and really kind of honing story and brand statements, and what is it that the value you bring. But then it is absolutely, where does that message live? Everywhere. So as right now, we're working on revamping their entire website. It hasn't been touched. It's one of those situations, it's been 4, 5, 6 years. So we're starting there. It's going to evolve into a digital marketing campaign that we're going to be able to take to LinkedIn, to Google, to do kind of more awareness for them. But at the same time, we're looking at the PowerPoint decks. And so as their sales team goes out and talks to clients, if a client does their homework, which most of them will, I want everything that's on the website or everything they see on their LinkedIn presence to really coordinate and to facilitate. So I absolutely believe that there's a place for traditional as well as a place for the digital marketing, because they have to work together. In this day and age, you got to count on them both. So I absolutely think you're going to be everywhere, and you want to just make sure that your message works and can speak to the brevity of digital. So let's get in and let's hit them, let's make our point. But that works incredibly well with traditional marketing as well. So if somebody opens an ad, they see a flyer, they look at a marketing deck, it's all hitting the same points. So
Sure.
Long-winded answer to say yes.
Yeah. So now, has things changed from verticals, right? So different industry verticals could be very specific. And I'm assuming there's some industries that are still old school and therefore may have to stick with traditional for a while. And sometimes they're old school and the industry doesn't want to move. Our industry's identical to that, where
Yeah.
insurance industry is so old school and the people in the industry don't want it to move. But now, you operate in certain, I understand you could probably do marketing for a lot of companies, but you have certain niches that you like to work with, I'm assuming. And so within those niches, how is the transition to digital and marketing, not only just overall as time goes on, but also since the world of COVID, right? And so
Yeah.
how have you seen the adaptability, and then even the changes in those markets have changed in the digital marketing space since COVID, right? Pre-COVID to now, I'm sure it's drastically changed. In
Mhm.
the the term digital marketing may not be called digital anymore; it might be called something else as we move forward. But what have you seen in
Right.
the niches that you work with in that transition?
There's a part of me that still says I think we're in transition.
Hmm.
That transition continues. I do believe the pandemic accelerated certain things.
Hmm.
So there's a lot more receptiveness to things like, meeting virtually. The sales teams that I support, they are still very focused on relationship, but they've gotten a lot more comfortable with doing this over a screen, saying, okay, well, eventually we're going to meet in 3 dimensions, but today it's going to be digital. But what it does is it also, I think, introduces a chance for, maybe excuse the term, but maybe intimacy
Hmm.
of, you invite somebody into your home and gosh, the dog's barking in the background, or maybe the kid passes behind you in the screen. Suddenly, we're real people. We're not necessarily this incredibly polished, this view only, here's the corporate view, but it's now, oh my gosh, I'm dealing with a real person, which I think lends itself incredibly well to sales in those situations. To your point about the different verticals, like I've got a fair amount of time spent in the financial services industry. And before I joined that industry, I'd been with an internet startup. So really talk about whiplash, where you
Hmm.
go from everything's cutting edge and what can we do to get out there faster, quicker, as brief as possible, to go to something that is incredibly highly regulated, in which has to go through multiple iterations and verifications, and is this appropriate? There's value to both, and there's frustrations, frankly, with both. What I found, though, consistently, is that I think the consumer, whether it's a B2B or it's a B2C, there was a phrase, if you remember back in the old days, it used to be caveat emptor, let the buyer
Hmm.
beware. So, you always would go in and you'd be suspicious, like, what is the salesperson trying to sell me? Or what is their angle, right?
Hmm.
I went to a talk, interestingly enough, in a financial services industry conference, probably 6, 8 years ago. And even then, they're like, it is completely flipped. It's 180 degrees. Now it is seller beware, because buyers are so much more able to find out information online, to look at things like Reddit, or to look at Twitter, or anywhere that they can go and find out information about this company, to say, who is it that I'm working with? So a lot of the message that I take to my clients, again, it goes back to this consistency, right? And you be your
Hmm.
genuine self. Everybody has this really interesting story. I've yet to work with a company where I'm like, man, I just don't like you. I don't think you have a good story. I don't think whatever. People, I think, really do want to do, they want to be proud of the work they do, the services they offer. So I think the challenge, whatever the mechanism is, the vehicle that we're communicating, a lot of it really comes down to being true to that story, being consistent, making it as concise as possible, so that wherever a consumer encounters it, whether it's you talking to them and pushing something out, or whether they're going out and seeking your information, that you want to be out there and you want to be found. So even with some of the more conservative industries, I'm finding an increasing willingness and awareness that, look, I don't get it, I don't like it, I don't use it, but as a business person, I appreciate that it's there. So help guide me to do what it is that we need to be doing. And that seems to be a lot more receptive, especially post-COVID,
Sure.
post-pandemic.
Sure. And so a lot of times I think that sometimes it's just baby steps, right? Taking the first step, moving in, but then there's also you jump in feet first, or in your case, I'm actually gonna quote you, and says that you have a healthy fear of heights, but you jumped on an
Yeah.
airplane to overcome it. So I'm using that as an analogy that sometimes you just
Mhm.
got to jump in, but I want you to share your story a little bit about how you jumped on the airplane just to get over your height too. So, and
Yeah.
maybe that analogy could actually work with your client base, right? Like just jump on the airplane and let's get it over.
That's thanks for that curveball, Butch, but
Yeah.
that's is a great example. So really quick to set it up.
Yep.
I have always had a very healthy fear of heights.
Mhm. Mhm.
It's interesting. I'm in an airplane, I'm fine, but put me on a 20-foot, 30-foot ladder, and it's like, okay, the ground, it looks very real, and I see the impact. And so, from a business setting, I think that's very true. Like when you talk
Mhm.
about something in concept, you go to a client and say, hey, what do you feel about digital? Oh, that's interesting. But when you start to talk about, well, budget impact and what are we going to do to allocate to this, and what are the metrics we want to measure against,
Mm.
Then suddenly, you're on that 30-foot ladder, you're looking there and you're like, this suddenly got a lot real, very real to me. But what it does is, I think in my case, so here I'm 25, 20, 26 years old. I will admit there was some buddies that were involved and we were all like, we should jump out of an airplane. And so there was a group of about 6 of us.
Mhm.
And we were all like, yeah, we're going to do this. Well, one guy actually took it upon himself to find a place that would allow you, or would let anybody come in and do a tandem jump. You
Mhm.
just essentially come in, sign the waiver that you're not going to sue anybody, pay the money, and up in the airplane you go. In fact, the training, air quotes, was a couple minutes with the person that was going to be your jump instructor. And then they sat
Mhm.
us down and they showed us a video clip from Good Morning America, where one of their reporters had jumped out of an airplane. And I'm like, I am so not prepared for this. But again, you lean into it and you're like, but I want to do this. And I
Yeah.
think that's part of the conversation with the clients, is to say, okay, where are they at? So are they just saying, yeah, I know it because my kids are telling me I need to be on social media, or I read and I realize I need to be on this, but I'm not convinced. In which case, then that's a different conversation that you're having to get them ready to lean out or to jump
Mhm.
out, versus others who are like, look, I've talked to colleagues. I can go back to the metal manufacturing company.
Yeah.
The president of the company, I think, kind of fits that mold. He is not, he absolutely adapts and will lean into technology that affects his business. But in terms of like social media and how do I want to do this, it's because peer companies and colleagues of his have seen it work that he's like, all right, I'm willing to trust.
Mhm.
So the end of
Yeah.
my story, just really
Yeah.
quick, it's actually bittersweet. So I did jump, I survived.
Yeah.
Ironically, at the last minute, I decided I was going to splurge and pay the extra 40 or $50. And one of the other jumpers would put a camera on his helmet and videotape you. So I'm like, I'm never doing this again. So we're going to do that. So I did, landed, I got the video. They put it to Kenny Loggins' Danger Zone. So it's the cheesiest video you're ever going to see. But it just so happened that my parents were alive at that time. And the place I jumped from was about a half hour, 45 minutes from their house. It was on a Saturday morning. So I stop over to see them, decide to spend the weekend down visiting them. And my mom, whom I had been a coward and had not told I was doing this. I confessed to my dad, but 26-year-old Chris would not tell his mom that he was jumping out of an airplane. So when she found out, she was livid. It was just like, I brought you into this world, I will take you out. So I'm like, no, that's okay. Well, anyway, so the bittersweet part of the story is she didn't see the video until I was heading back. I lived out of town, so I was heading back Sunday in the evening. I was like, you want to see this? And she's like, yeah, sure. So I put it on. At the end of it, she looks at me like with this, she's got this look on her face like, I will kill you again if you ever do this again. But she had this huge smile on her face because she knew that I faced a personal fear. Well, as things have turned out, my mom actually had an aneurysm a week later. And 2 weeks after that, she passed away.
Man.
So my final memory of my mom, as sad as that was her seeing me conquer that fear.
Mm.
So, again, we all live life. We should live life to its fullest. You never know what kind of curveball you're going to be thrown. But I look at that and say, oh my gosh, what a blessing that event was. That choice to lean into this happened to be. Not only did it allow me to challenge something for myself, but it gave me an incredibly precious memory of a final memory with my mom, and something that I've carried with me now, 2.5 decades later. So it really is. Whenever I have a chance to share that story with a client or with a friend, I am always saying, don't be stupid. I mean, maybe I was stupid,
Yeah.
but don't be afraid. Try this. Let's give it a shot. See what happens. Let's get smarter. And 95% of the time, people lean into that. I'm like, you know what? Okay. So it's really pretty
Mhm.
cool.
Yeah, no, it's definitely a great analogy, and businesses do need to lean into it. And then there's the opposite, right? There's that somebody wrote a book. He quoted that the entrepreneurs, there's certain ones that it's almost like they skydive, but they're building the plane on the way down. And yeah, so there's a little
Yeah.
bit more of the opposite too. But obviously you've got years of experience doing all this, and somehow you found the time and the energy to actually try to put it inside of a book. And so you have something in the work that's coming out in the
Yeah.
next few months. Can you give us some insight on what's to come, and what can we expect out of this book?
Well, thank you. The book is going to be called Sales Fusion. It's actually coming out in about 2 or 3 weeks in early October. It'll be available on Amazon. That's my plug. But what I really love about it is it's a co-authored book, meaning that my responsibility was really a chapter. What's neat about the concept, though, and I think you're maybe doing something
Yeah,
similar
yeah.
in a couple of months as well,
Hmm.
but it allows a group of individuals, professionals that most of these folks I know, I've met, I've worked with, I think incredibly highly of. And the publisher approached us and said, would you contribute a chapter? Now, the interesting thing is the book I'm in is called Sales Fusion, not Marketing Fusion, not Leadership Fusion. Those books were earlier that I just I missed the opportunity. But the publishers came and said, one of the concepts that we run into is that there tends to be sometimes friction between salespeople and marketing people. We would love to include a chapter or two about marketing in this. And so I thought about that, and they approached me. I took the weekend to think about it. And I came back and said, you know what? Yeah, I really love that. I love the idea of offering maybe a practical guide of how we work together. Because frankly, when you're a consultant, you go into a situation, you recognize you're there for a finite period of time. So you want to leave, your clients better off than when you got there. So, have I made them smarter? Have I made them more sales? Have I made them more effective? Have I poured into them? And I looked at this chapter and said, this is an opportunity that I believe the best in most people. And there's very few people that have disappointed me in life. We always can be better. We can always challenge each other. We do make mistakes. I get all of that. But at the end of the day, I really think we see ourselves as highly competent, intelligent people that ultimately want to do good for ourselves, for our families, for our clients, for our companies. So that's how I approach the chapter is, how do I help marketing and sales both to maybe see things a little bit from the other person's perspective, or the other side's perspective, so that maybe we cut through some of the noise or the clutter that we sometimes run into, and can be more effective as a result of it. So that's really my goal. So the chapter is broken into, I wrote it as 6 lessons that I learned as a kid, how to play nicely, share your toys, use your words, say thank you. And not to be demeaning or to talk down, but to simply say, gosh, those lessons we learned in kindergarten, first grade, and second grade really still apply now as adults. And it's good to revisit those and to realize, gosh, use your words, be as detailed as you can about what you're trying to accomplish, and help the people who are trying to help you, marketing included, to understand what it is, and then to feed information back to them about how it's working so you can get smarter again together. So that's the goal. That's the hope.
Yeah, I look forward to it, and I'm sure people that are listening to this podcast will look forward or pick up a copy of the Sales Fusion. I appreciate you sharing some insight, and we're getting close to wrapping it up. But one personal thing I picked up during some of our conversations, and the information I picked up is you hold this certificate from Scotland, and yeah, and it says so. I guess you're a Scottish lord, and so. What is that? And I guess what's the certificate about?
So let me put it from a marketing perspective. So this is a good illustration of, we all have a story, right? And you might not think about this as like, us, it's really relevant, but let me tell you the story, and then we'll tie this back. Several years ago, we always celebrate birthdays, but we don't make a big deal, especially for my wife or I. It's about the kids, or it's about the family. But for this birthday, my wife, she comes into to the kitchen table. I'm having breakfast, and she's like, "Happy birthday!" And she slides this package over to me, and I'm like, "Thank you." So, and she could tell on her face something was this. She was delighted about whatever this was. So I open it up, and it's a folder, and I open it up. Inside is the certificate saying, "Congratulations, Chris Spanier, you are now a Scottish lord." And I look at her, and she's nodding, and she's like, "Yes, you are." The story behind it is, there was some family land in Scotland. The family, I don't know if they were on hard times or they just weren't really interested in keeping it up, but they wanted to sell the property. And so, in just here as in the United States, there was a developer who came along and envisioned this strip mall on these old Scottish Highlands. And another group came along and said, "No, we want to buy the land instead. We want to preserve this. We want to preserve the history." So what they did is they talked the owners into selling the land to them. Then, to kind of fund it, what they do is they're selling plots of the land. So I own a 10 by 10, 100 square feet of Scottish land on this land, which entitles me to be called Lord Christopher Spanier. In fact, I haven't done this, but they've included a little certificate that you could take to the BMV and say, "I'd like to change my license to be Lord Christopher Spanier." I have yet to do that. I don't know if I ever will, but it's a fun little, party talk, like, "Hey, I'm a lord." I did go back later, and I bought my wife a plot of land. So she's a lady. So we are lord and lady, even though neither of us are Scottish. But what we've done is paid a little bit of money to help preserve some historic lands in Scotland. So I love the conservation aspect of it. In fact, we are invited. You can't build on the land. There are lots of rules and regulations around it, but I am allowed to go camp. So it gives me a great excuse to go and pitch a tent over in Scotland someday. And it's going to be the Scottish Highlands, which could be a little cold and foggy, but it would still be really cool to say, I've slept on my land, right? Make the tent, call it Castle Spanier, and be done with it. But the cool thing about this is you think about this, and you know, I've encountered so many clients who are like, we're not that interesting. We do, fill in the blank. There's a branding agency. They're actually very interesting. But the metal fabrication company, they're like, we're metal fabrication. I'm like, no, you've got a really cool. Your stuff is in orbit. Parts that you've created. People out there are crafting, are saving lives as medical devices. You are doing wind turbines, helping us, turn to green energy. You're out in outer space. This is an awesome story. Another client, they do gourmet soft pretzels. They ship all over the country. Everybody has this really cool story. And I think we have a tendency, which is good, to be humble and to say, gosh, I'm not that interesting. I have yet to meet a person that I have not found fascinating. There are aspects of our lives that we think are normal or that I think are routine that just give us an opportunity to connect with others. Hopefully people might hear the podcast, Butch, and say, hey, I want to do something else. I want to go and maybe save some Scottish Highlands, and then I can be a lord or a lady as well. That's awesome. And that has nothing to do with Chris. When I pass on, my title does not go to my son, but I've done some small little part, thanks to my wife, to help, keep some natural historical beauty going for another generation in Scotland. That's a pretty cool thing to have said. It isn't going to change how I act today. I'm certainly not going to go and change my driver's license, but it makes me a little more of a human being. And I think when you get right down to it, marketing and sales and all this really are about connecting with people and helping them to see who you are, who your company is, the products and services you are, and how you can potentially help them. So
for sure. And it sounds like you do a great job with your clients and the niches that you serve. And I look forward to reading a copy of Sales Fusion. If anybody wanted to get in touch with you to further the conversation we've already had, or even just to reach out to you for any reason, how do they get in touch with you?
Easiest way to do it, my company is Carpe Diem Consulting Group, a little bit long, but you can email me at chris@Carpe, C-A-R-P-E, Diem, D-I-E-M, and then C for consulting, G for group.com, carpediemcg.com. I'm a big fan of the Robin Williams film. So when I was naming the company, I looked back and I said, this is how I want to work my business every day. Go out there, do my best for everybody, and Carpe the Diem.
Yeah, sounds great. All right. Thank you so much for your time on the podcast.
Hey, Butch, thanks for having me. I really enjoyed the conversation.
Yeah, thank you.
Take care.
Yeah.